The upcoming release of the Nike Dunk Low Niwashi has caught my eye. Of course it has. I'm here in Tokyo, Japan, and this is a very, very Japanese shoe. But to be honest, that part of the shoe was the second reason that they reeled me in with these guys. The first reason was because I was thinking about doing a video about these guys right here, the Papa Bears, but I realized that the drop date is just too close to making the video. I always make videos that are about 10 to 14 days ahead of the drop date so people can have an idea of what's coming down the line. And then I realized those Papa Bears was just too close. I had to look somewhere else. And then I looked at the Niwashis and I thought, okay, I'll get into that and find out what's going on. And I am super glad that I did. It was already an interesting looking shoe, but then the story behind it is absolutely fascinating. And because I'm here in Tokyo, Japan, I can give you some insight into it in some particular places, like the name and also the handkerchief that they're talking about being in there, because it's got these special edition stuff in the box as well. And of course, the shoe itself, there's tons to talk about in there. So I'm going to bring all that to you guys today as we take a close-up look at the upcoming release of the Nike Dunk Low Niwashi. This is the Tokyo Bara 23 Sneaker Channel. Tokyo Bara 23 Sneaker Channel です。毎日アップするので毎日見てください。And every single day from Tokyo, Japan, I bring you content about upcoming sneaker releases, sneaker news, and sneaker reviews. And in the spotlight today is that upcoming release on May the 15th of the Nike Dunk Low Niwashis. And that's like as hard-boiled, as penned in, as absolutely tattooed on as you can get a drop date, because it's already showing up in the sneakers app here. Now, when I went and looked at the overseas sites, like I said, I'm here in Tokyo, Japan, the overseas sites still say summer 2021 on these guys, so I'm not sure what the release is going to be like in Europe and the US and places like that. It might be a very specific Japanese shoe, or it just might be because it's very Japanese. The information on the Japanese sites that I go to have got the up-to-date stuff, and that'll trickle out into the rest of the world. But I'm hitting that May the 15th button pretty hard, because that's what it says here in Japan on the Japanese sites and also on the Japanese sneakers app. So it's a shoe I'm very, very interested in. It says it only goes up to 30 centimeters on the sneakers app, and I'm at 30.5, and that half centimeter actually does make a difference to my feet. So I'm not sure if I'll be going after these in the wrong size or trying to find another place to get them in the right size, but definitely a shoe that people need to be getting into and really paying attention to, because there's an awful lot going on in the shoe. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you some information about the background to the shoe that maybe you don't know, because I know this because I'm here in Japan, but then also we'll take a look at the construction of the shoe, and then also on top of that we'll get into those extra little bits that are added to this shoe to make it one of the greatest dunk lows of the upcoming season. So let's strap yourselves in and let's go through this as fast as we possibly can. Let's start with the name Niwashi, and I'm saying it in those two halves because in Japanese it's actually two kanji. That's how you say Japanese character, kanji. I don't know if I'll be able to put it up on the screen somewhere to give you the two characters Niwa and Shi, but I'll tell you that Niwa means garden and Shi means doer, because Niwashi means gardener, the person who does the garden, and that totally makes sense when you look at the shoe in terms of its color and in terms of the story and all about that kind of gardening feel. Now, there is a second name for it behind Niwashi. It's something like roots of peace or something along those lines. So it's got that peace feel about it. And if you look at, hopefully I'll be able to find one of the pins. I call them pins, but you might call them badges. It's got this sort of tree feel, but instead of it being the tree up, it's the roots down. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting look. But then I realized that that actual look is to do with the peace sign, like the CND kind of peace sign. That's why the trunk is one line and then three roots spreading off at the lower part of it. So that whole roots and peace idea is apparently a big part of the shoe. And I'll be bringing you, that information about the shoe and talking about the details on it and the materials that go into making it, as well as some hits on it that people haven't been, haven't seen on the sites out there. They might have been overlooked. So let's get into all the rest of the shoe now. Now, you know it's a Niwashi, the gardener, Niwashi, the garden. Then now we can kind of get into the shoe itself. Now, first things first, materials, basically two materials as far as I can tell. One is those overlays, the line that runs from the toe box, the quarter line, the laces, and down the ankle, and the heel is in a light beige, and then on the panels you have the black running through it with some extra hits that we'll get into in a minute. But first things first, we stay on the beige, which is a very soft leather. It seems to be treated in some way to give it a little bit more softness. I wouldn't go so far as to say say suede, but definitely a beautiful soft buttery leather that runs through that line of the whole shoe. And then the panels done in black seem to be done in some kind of mesh or man-made material rather than leather, and that gives it a sort of it's almost like there's a kind of canvassy feel about it, which gives you that kind of sense of the garden and the nature and stuff like that as well. So but the interesting thing is, if you get right to the middle of the shoe on the midfoot there, you've got that beautiful swoosh that offsets those colors in the white, because it balances out the kind of beige and the black. But behind that, as you zoom right in on the panel there, you can see these embroidered lines running parallel behind the swoosh, maybe six to eight lines that are stitched right through the midfoot there, which adds a little bit of extra definition to the shoe and sort of catches your eye. It looks like a solid line when you're far away, but when you're zoomed in, like we surely are here on the green screen, you can see there's separate embroidered lines running through behind the swoosh on that. And then if we go around to the heel, we get to look at one of my favorite features on the shoe, which is above the lines. So we'll do the lines first and then into that branding panel up there. And what I'm talking about is the three lines. So it was many lines running through the midfoot behind the swoosh, and those lines are now brought to the heel section, and just three of them running parallel and horizontal across the shoe below that branding panel. But it's a branding panel that really catches my eye. So we're up there, and it's got this weird kind of green feel to it. Now what it reminds me of is that I remember this from my grandfather's house, actually, that he used to have plants like flowers that he'd cut, from the garden, and he'd put them in this green kind of material that was, I don't know, it was like styrofoam or something. You could sort of puncture it with the plants, with the flowers, and they wouldn't fall over, instead of having soil. And that's what it reminds me of, is this sort of green kind of polystyrene effect stuff. And it's got the green for that, but also it's kind of an embossed feel as the branding sort of jumps off of it instead of being stitched into it as you normally find on Nike Dunks and Dunk Lows and Dunk Low Pros. But also with that sort of embossed feel, it's green on green, and it definitely has that nature feel, and your feeling of the Niwashi, the gardener, going into this shoe. It's very, very evident there. Now coming back forward to the lateral side, we can look at the one piece of branding on here. Now I have not found a place that tells me that this branding is anything other than Nike's take on gardener for the Japanese. I do not know of this as being some kind of brand or a skateboard shop here or anything like that. Might be wrong. There might be one out there that I just haven't heard about or I don't know about. But to me, this bit of branding, which is usually there when it's a collaboration, usually they put branding in this place here when it's a collaboration, but for this particular shoe, I think it's just to do with the story of the shoe, and it isn't actually a collaboration or branding that goes with a sneaker store or a skateboard store out here in Japan. So, and then let's go up to the tongues to see there's a balance between the back of the tongues where that heel, and not the back of the tongues, the back of the shoe where that heel branding was in green on green, and you go up to the top of the tongues and you see exactly the same again. But what's more interesting here is it's got a kind of translucent feel about it, and you can see the top line of the tongue behind that tongue branding, because that's that slightly translucent feel in the green there. And then behind that you go into the shoe and it's a green insole, but this time instead of having green on green branding, they've gone with a lighter Nike branding, so it's much more obvious on the interior of this shoe. And then I think pretty much the last thing we have to look at on the shoe itself before we go to the outside, because there's stuff there to look at, is the outsole. And you see that it's done in a sort of gumsole effect, but it's got a slightly translucent feel about it, which adds a little extra dimension to the shoe. So all in all, it's a great looking shoe, and we need to go to the toes. I forgot about the toes, and this is one of those points I think most people are kind of overlooking. Usually I don't see this, and I might be wrong, but I just don't see this, where what you've got is the beige toe box and then the black panel, but running across the front end of that you've got this extra hit of green in there to give it that kind of feel of the garden effect. So that green on the toe, the green on the tongues, and then the green on the heel all comes together to give you that kind of green feel of the shoe and the gardening. So and I think that's everything there is to say, hopefully, about the shoe itself. So let's flip out from that and go and have a look at two things. I already talked about the badges, and we'll be back looking at those badges again. I think there's 5 or 6 of them in lots of different sort of designs and features, but more than that is in the box comes a handkerchief, which I'll be showing you right now. But to be honest, I don't think it's a handkerchief. I think it's what the Japanese call a furoshiki. furoshiki, which is a kind of cloth that they use to wrap precious things in, and it's a very traditional thing. It's very cultural. It's very Japanese to use a cloth to wrap things up in, especially when they're being transported somewhere. Now, some people still do it for their lunch boxes. You know, if you take a packed lunch to work with you or to school, it's not uncommon to see that wrapped up and tied in a furoshiki, but other times it's more precious stuff, and there's a very cultural feel about it. So I know some sites are calling this a handkerchief or a cloth, but actually I think it's a bit more than that. I think it's a bit more cultural than that. It's called a furoshiki. A furoshiki is a very unusual Japanese word that you won't normally hear coming across. You definitely wouldn't find a word like that in like Japanese conversation classes, if you know what I mean. Furoshiki. And on that note, that was the last thing to get to. Was you know, like I said, I would bring you stuff about the shoe and also the extras that are on there, because it's got these extras added into it. So it turns out what I thought was a very, very simple shoe is actually a very complicated shoe, and also one of the, you know, it's got the extra bits in there, sort of a special edition, which makes it one of the nicest shoes of the season. So fingers crossed, getting hands on a pair of these would be a very, very big W for whoever's out there, including me. So hopefully that'll be happening sometime soon, May 15th. And with that being said, it's time to wrap this video up. I'm just thank you guys for checking out the content, and all I've got left to do is just to say I do this every single day. And you know what I say when I say I do it every single day, I also say that means that you are guaranteed to see me